The Mandalorian and Grogu occupied the same space for me as the Clone Wars movie from 2008, where it should have been part of a show, it was smashed together, and of course, it features Jabba the Hutt's son as a prominent character. This is Popcorn Heist, where I love discussing and reviewing movies and TV and ranking things from worst to best. And I'm a giant Star Wars fan. Some of my favorite movies are Star Wars movies, and I've been a fan of the franchise since I was a little kid. I was a fan of the Mandalorian TV show, especially seasons 1 and 2, and I thought season 3 was a little bit overly hated. I did enjoy certain things about season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I thought they were on a solid track. So you would have thought I'd be really excited for The Mandalorian and Grogu, and I wouldn't say I wasn't excited. I just felt a lot less excited than I usually would have when going to the theater to see a Star Wars movie. I feel like Star Wars movies are usually such a big event and have so much hype and media around them, and this just felt a little bit lackluster, and obviously the conversation online didn't help with that. A lot of people were coming into this movie with kind of a negative taste in their mouths. And I definitely had some thoughts on the change in format from TV show to movie, but I tried to come in with an open mind, and now it's my time to review The Mandalorian and Grogu. So spoilers for The Mandalorian and Grogu. I won't be spoiling the Mandalorian TV show because I feel like there are people who've seen this movie that haven't seen that show. So spoilers for the movie, but not for the Mandalorian TV show. But before I get into the review, at Popcorn Heist, I choose a quote per video. And the quote of today's video is, "The old protect the young, then the young protect the old. This is the way." Which I feel like they tried to make like the most emotional line in The Mandalorian and Grogu. And I feel like the way I felt about this quote was similar to the way I felt about this movie. It had some weight and some punch, but you're left a little bit confused about what the logic behind it was and what it actually meant to the overall story, because I get Grogu is young in his own lifespan, but technically he's older than Mando. So I see where Mando was going with the quote. I think it's cute that, Mando's protected Grogu for so long, and now Grogu's beginning to protect Mando. And I do think that is an emotional moment and a good line, but at the same time, it's not technically true because Grogu is older than Mando. And for that to be the main emotional line of the movie, I feel like it falls a little bit short just because you have to think in the back of your head, it doesn't truly fully make sense. So getting into my thoughts on the movie, I feel like they could have went multiple different routes with this movie. They could have just made it kind of a continuation of the original Mandalorian, where it's fun adventures, cute stories. They could have went for a connection of all these different Star Wars pieces as they move into the future of Star Wars. Or they could have made it an emotional exploration of these two characters and explored some deep themes like how their relationship is going to work given their lifespans are so different, and how they're going to exist in the universe with such different backgrounds, given that Grogu has these Jedi powers and this Jedi background. So I feel like they could have went with fun, cute storyline, a connection, and a movement into the future of Star Wars, or they could have went for a true, deep character explanation. And I think they went for the first option, which in my opinion was probably the worst of the three ways to go. I guess a movie that connected all these different Star Wars pieces wouldn't have resonated that much either, because when The Mandalorian tried to do that, a lot of fans who weren't fans of the animated shows didn't really like that, but they could have built to something a little bit bigger, and I do feel like they went a little bit more low stakes in the context of the Star Wars universe and really didn't move anything forward. It almost feels like this was a complete side quest that could be taken out of the larger story without much impact, and is really just a fun adventure and a fun side quest. And I won't say that's fully a negative, because that is part of the reason so many fans loved The Mandalorian. There were these episodic stories that you can kind of just jump into, and they were easily digestible and enjoyable in the TV format. But I don't think that made as much sense or was as enjoyable in the movie format. I really don't fully understand the decision behind why they wanted to change formats in the first place. The Mandalorian was a successful TV show, and what you kind of loved about it was you were able to get these short stories and this episodic nature because it was in the format of a TV show. So, moving this show into a movie, I feel like was a questionable decision in the first place. So, if you are going to do it, I feel like you should do something a little bit more new and a little bit more impactful and something that builds on the story of The Mandalorian or the story of Star Wars. So, I don't get the choice to move it from TV to movie. And if you are going to make that choice, I don't think that just kind of continuing the TV episodic, fun, quick adventure nature was really the best way to handle it. And you could kind of feel where the different climaxes are in this movie. I don't know that they necessarily took season 4 and smashed it together as they did with the Clone Wars, where they really split it up into 4 exact different stories. There was a little bit more cohesion in this, but you could still feel the different climaxes, and it still felt like a video game, kind of like the TV show does, where you go to this planet, find this person, they give you a new quest, and that kind of contributes to the overall quest. And mind you, if this movie was an episode of The Mandalorian or multiple episodes of The Mandalorian, it would have been a mediocre episode of the show. There's episodes that are way more intense, way more impactful, and each season, without getting into spoilers, has a harder gut punch, whether it be an emotional moment or a moment that leads you into the future of Star Wars or a big final battle sequence. Each season ends with a bigger impact or emotional or intense moment than this movie had. And if you're going to adapt a show into this movie format, I feel like they should have spent a little bit more time really figuring out what their impact was going to be rather than just telling this offshoot story. And The Mandalorian was the flagship show of Disney Plus. It was the reason that so many Star Wars fans and fans of Disney in general were brought to streaming services, and they pushed us all to streaming with The Mandalorian. And now that they want to move back into movies, they kind of use that as a way to get Star Wars back in the movie theater and a way to get Lucasfilm back into the movie theater. So now that they're moving formats, it just feels a little bit jarring and a little bit disjointed. And I think if they were just going to continue the same story, they should have just went with making season 4 of The Mandalorian. But that being said, I didn't hate the movie. I did enjoy things about it. I thought that the action was actually surprising. I thought that the movie in general looked a little bit better than I expected it to be just from the marketing and the scenes that were released before the movie came out. And like I said, the action was really great at moments. I was actually really impressed with Mando's fighting, and I thought that Grogu had a lot of cute moments where he is now this character that can actually handle himself and take care of Mando, and they now have more of a reciprocal relationship. So I thought the action worked for both of those characters. I love the practical effects with Grogu, and the action for Road to the Hut as well was also really good at times. That being said, a lot of the action sequences are against either animals or disposable droids or villains we don't really care about. I thought the droids looked cool, the animals looked great, and the villains were fine, but none of them had that impact where you were truly invested or worried about what was going to happen to our main characters. The score was absolutely phenomenal in this movie, which is expected because Star Wars always has a great score, and Ludwig Göransson has made a great score for the Mandalorian show. So I expected the score to be great, and it even exceeded expectations. Grogu was also so freaking cute in this movie. I love that he's now able to kind of go off on his own and actually know what's going on and help Mando and devise a plan to go save Mando on a completely different planet and save him from death multiple times. So I love Grogu in this movie. He's always great, but he was especially great in this movie. And of course, it's always endearing to see the relationship between Mando and Grogu. I do wish we got a little bit more of like an explanation or an exploration of how their relationship is going to work as Grogu grows beyond Mando. I feel like that could be a cool theme to explore, and this movie doesn't really go into that. It doesn't really want to touch on those deeper subjects. It just wants to be a fun adventure, so we don't get that. So I do think that there's positives about this movie, but in general, the pacing also felt a little bit off, and the movie felt a little bit too long, and it wasn't a super long movie in the first place, but it just didn't need to be as long as it was. There's a lot of places where this movie slows down and is kind of boring. I feel like that sequence where Grogu heals Mando is one, super predictable, and then goes on way too long where Mando is passed out for days, and it's like, what are the hunters doing? Don't you have this dog type creature that can track Mando, and he's just laying on the ground for days on end and you're not able to find him? So I don't know what the trackers were doing. That sequence went on way too long, didn't need to be there. Once Grogu kind of heals him and takes care of him for a little bit, they should have had Mando heal. It would have been more realistic and made a little bit more sense. And the final sequence of this movie is solid, nothing bad, but because it's against villains that you don't really care about in the Hutt twins and their droid army, and the one assassin who, that fight is cool, Mortal Kombat style fight between the assassin and Mando. Cool fight, but you don't really care about that character. It's not impactful. And there's villains from The Mandalorian that are just more interesting and more compelling and more ominous. I felt like the final sequence kind of fell short and again, wasn't bad, but just not goosebumps. And I feel like when you're going into a Star Wars movie, the final sequence and the battle should really give you goosebumps. So you're kind of just there, things are happening, and it's enjoyable enough, but not a stellar final sequence. I also feel like the X-Wings and the New Republic, if they were going to bring them in, they should have came into the fight earlier. So it could have been like a Rogue One style, flipping between flight battle and ground battle, and they're not just coming in to pick up Mando. It's actually a fight that's going on multiple fronts. So I feel like they should have come into the sequence earlier. It wasn't that interesting. You know that they're going to get a ride off planet. So when they come, it's like, okay, that's fine. And for Zeb, who's from Star Wars Rebels, to be like, I'm tired of these hot rescues or whatever the quote was, give me a break, Zeb. In Rebels, you're doing hot rescues in every other episode. So you've done it like 20 to 40 times with that squad. So maybe he needs to have that conversation with someone else in Ezra and the Ghost Crew, and not Mando, who he's only saved like 3 times that we've seen. So my final rating for this movie is a 3 out of 5 popcorn buckets. It's kind of exactly what I expected going in. It was just a continuation of the Mandalorian story, a fun little adventure, and an enjoyable time, but ultimately a disappointing next step for the Star Wars universe and a disappointing look at the fall of Star Wars movies being released in the theaters. This is the first Star Wars movie in 7 years, and I would have enjoyed something really new and enjoyable and impactful, and not just a continuation of something we've already seen on TV. If you enjoyed this review, I really hope that you like this video and subscribe to the channel and join me for more Star Wars and more movie and TV content.